Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network. Hi, this is Amit Doshi, and I wanted to thank each and every one of our listeners. It's been 2 years since I founded IVM, and it's been an amazing 2 years. We wanted to learn a little bit more about who is listening to our shows, and so we put together a short survey. The survey is anonymous, and we aren't going to be collecting any personal information. I would really appreciate it if you could take a couple of minutes out of your day and go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and fill it out. Thanks, and please keep listening.
You're listening to Keeping It Queer with Naveen Narona.
Hello and welcome everybody to Keeping It Queer, an all-new episode, and here we have someone who's very interesting. Today we have Millie Setia. Hi Millie.
Hi.
And Millie is an artist, an activist, and she wants to do so much more, and today on the episode we'll find out everything about Millie's life. So first of all, welcome to the show, Millie, and I'm glad I was like, when I was first thinking about the show, I was thinking about all the people I want to bring on it, and so far I've achieved to get most people and get their perspectives, but I always wanted someone who's from the art background, because to inculcate colors and use the colors of the rainbow effectively to make a statement is unique. And even your wardrobe right now is just like full of colors, and so that's a part of your personality, isn't it?
I guess. I mean, people always find something to say about the way I dress. I went to art school where it wasn't easy to be different. Everyone was being different. Like, everyone was doing that different thing. Like, everyone had blue hair. Everyone went bald. It was really hard.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what I really did. But I think somehow I end up looking weird.
But that's a quirk of it, right? That brings out the best in you. So, take us back to your early life. Where were you born and how was early days for you?
I always lived in Mumbai. But I changed like 8 schools.
And Mumbai is a big enough city for you to basically find school in every corner.
Yeah, but that's not even the reason. Yeah, it was actually my parents and I. My parents never put any pressure on me to, get great marks or anything. But we would have a crush on a new school every now and then. And then they just send us there. And I'm actually...
I like this, have a crush on the school.
Yeah.
Iski diwarein itni malmali hai.
Something like that. Like, this one has a nice arts center, or that this one's uniform is really cool. And so what I'm trying to say is, I didn't have a lot of struggles that a lot of people do, I guess. I had...
but changing schools is a struggle if I look at it that way.
You are right.
I changed twice and I still felt a void in my life. The transition of not having a friend, and that was weird.
So with me, what happened was every year I was a new stereotype. So one year I was Hermione Granger. The next year I was Luna Lovegood. I mean, if you get Harry Potter references...
I love Harry Potter references, but...
Okay, then
but I like how fast it went from Hermione to Luna.
In a matter of 1 month. It took one summer
vacation. There should have been a lavender in middle, but then just...
There was no lavender in the middle. I mean, you'd think with the colours, there would be more shades, but nope. It just went zoop. And then I was called all kinds of, because and then one year I was the studious one, and another year I was the sporty one, and schools have this weird way of foisting stereotypes on you. I think which was part of why I became an artist, because I felt like I had struggled a lot in my own privileged little way. So I was like, oh my god, there's so much more to the world that school is showing us. And
that's true. That threshold crossing happens for most of us, but outside of school, right? Before actually puberty hit in. And how was it for you?
I went to a boarding school at the age of 10, all because I wanted to. And
so it was like a conscious decision to
because I got this idea at the age of 9, and I told my parents, why don't I go to a boarding school? I think it'll be fun to live in a school and live with my friends.
But who planted that idea that boarding school is cool?
I think it was some uncle who planted it, and it backfired.
How so?
He said that if you don't do your homework, you'll go to a boarding school. I was like, what's a boarding school? And then they explained it to me.
That's a very common thread though. You don't eat your food, you don't eat dudhi, you'll go to boarding school. I'm like, what will happen in boarding school? They'll only feed you dudhi. I'm like, no.
Yeah, the food really sucked. Sucked.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I grew 6 inches within 1 year. So I was flourishing. I was the happiest I've ever been.
Feeding you right though, whatever was happening.
Yeah, I was there was trekking, and I was reading Harry Potter, and I was in the
So
prime.
you relate to Harry Potter more when you're like living in a hostel, is it? Like how was
Oh
it?
yeah, it
Because,
really
like,
helped.
Travel away from home with your friends and your colleagues and something
Yeah.
magical about it.
Yeah. It was exactly like that, because even now in my imagination, Hogwarts is actually the campus of my boarding school then. And from the point of view of 10-year-old me,
Yeah.
because the size of me has doubled since then. And I visited that school only last year during New Year's,
Yeah.
and it is shrunk.
Oh,
It's so small.
it feels smaller, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the school I remember. I remember it Hogwarts proportions.
Yeah, because you like gape and you marvel at your...
Yeah.
So even I was like a very starry kid. I remember
Yeah.
that. Like I was just like gaze at random stuff and find home in like random corners of the walls and all that. But
Yeah.
so does that like ever determine your quirks as what you're going to turn up as an individual later? Do you think like you were a little aloof than most people?
I think I was always the kind of kid who was always daydreaming. Like even when I was living with my parents and much younger, they used to say Millie ki nahi, because I was always lost, and it was like your name is so ironic. And kids used to go down and play, and I used to sit and draw at home. I was so weird. Like I had a lot of imaginary friends. I don't know where it all started.
Nice. So
Yeah.
you do remember any of your imaginary friends now?
I do remember.
Can
them.
we get introductions to some of them?
Okay, they were quite boring. Which is the primary characteristic of my
Precisely, yeah.
imaginary friends were basically okay.
Like, it's interesting for you, but then like you realize that as soon as you start telling somebody else about your imaginary friends, they're like maybe not that cool, so it's okay.
Yeah, no, I was so hyper aware that they are so uncool, because there was 3 people who so they were based on 3 people I knew in real life.
Okay.
Who I saw in my art class on every Thursday or whatever. When we used to do oil pastels.
Correct.
Oil paints we didn't use at that time. We were 6 and 7, and these 2-3 people, one of them was this girl in a blue dress and with 2 ponytails, and basically the 3 of them were my jury. So if I ever made a decision, I would ask them and they would take a vote.
Nice, yeah.
But they always told me not to do what I wanted to do. So it was like this imaginary conversation with these, like an OCD kid's imagination,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
I can't stop myself. So these 3
The
imaginary...
subconscious will maybe like give me the right answer.
Yeah, so there was that, and there was a boy with a parrot on his shoulder. I don't know where he came from, but...
From the seas.
Yeah.
Probably a pirate.
I wish he had an interesting backstory, but all I remember thinking is... So I told my little brother that, Millie is really bored of you guys, and I have a twin sister, Maya, who takes in my place so that I can go and live in this magic world that I actually want to live in. So the only person I managed to convince that I had an interesting life was my really dumb brother who obviously worshipped me because he was 4 years younger than me.
That's adorable. So now what does your brother do?
He is now, how old is he? 22 or something. They change every year, man, these siblings. So
and the age as well.
Yeah, they age every year. He wants to do an MBA now, actually.
Okay.
So yeah, very different. We are
so
very different.
let's come back from that entire digression we went into. So you had imaginary friends as a kid, and then so how was growing up for you after that? Like after schools and all changed?
So I took a year off after school because I actually in 12th when school got over, I told my parents, I was very confident. I'll travel around the world, I'll draw, people will pay me or give me food, and I won't go to college.
That's a very high school American thing to say.
I know.
A lot of I'll find my gap here, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go and do some stuff.
But
man.
I didn't ask for a gap year. I said I don't want to go to college at all.
Yeah.
I just said I'm not going to college. I'm just going to travel at the time. This obviously. I understand that as American is probably privilege. I was consuming all these Western ideas, and it was quite in my own world to begin with.
It's liberating though in a way,
Yeah, it was. But then here's what my parents said. They said take a gap year, think about it for a year, and then we'll see. So within that year, I got really bored. So I end up I'll apply to college. But I did kickboxing during that year, which was my. So I started doing.
Do you still practice though?
I do. And as a joke, I started ballet later, which was a joke, but now I've
the far ends of both spectrums.
Yeah, because I used to joke that I'm not feminine or whatever, and I don't have the discipline. So as a challenge to myself, I said, hey, why don't I heard about a ballet class. I went there.
But when did this intuition come in? Maybe I'm not feminine. Most people don't think about it like that. At what age were you?
You're right. I mean, I think people always said I was kind of a tomboy, even when I was quite young. And I always felt like I would have to be schooled into this kind of somewhere. Tying my hair properly or like sitting properly with a skirt. I guess everyone learns at some point. Everyone who's a woman learns at some point that being a woman is a performance. So it's not being yourself. And so a lot of the times, like I still have to remember to contain myself, within a certain space. And it's I don't think it was that scary for me in my family or anything that I learned that level of self-consciousness that sometimes people have. But I have noticed that there's a lot of performance involved.
So then you did ballet and kickboxing that one gap year.
A little bit later. But anyway, so then I went to college, I went to fine arts. I studied fine arts because I thought this must be the easiest thing. They can't tell me what to do. You can't institutionalize what I already know. But they were very close to ruining art for me anyway.
How so?
We were just told that everything had to be like drawn in proportion. Like the human anatomy had, the human face has 5 eyes. Like you have to measure, like there's one eye in the middle of the nose and this.
Yeah.
So you can't draw what you're feeling about someone. You can't interpret them almost. You almost have to follow these rules in order to like. There's a way to see the people.
And that's not what art is in general.
Yeah.
It's like that scene from Dead Poet Society where they tell them what poetry is by writing it on paper.
Exactly.
And,
so all those books that I had read or all those movies I'd watched until going to college, I was like, this is such a waste. And, this is... So I guess somewhere around then the rebel me started to emerge in earnest. And I started thinking, screw this institution.
Yeah, fine arts, more like fine whatever arts.
Yeah. Yeah, fine, whatever. And then I went to do sculpture, and then I got bored of fine arts, and I realized if I'm ever going to make a career out of this, I'm going to have to take money from my parents, which anyway, now I had started to realize that I was quite privileged, and people were saying that I can get away with things, and I didn't want to seem that way forever. So I moved to design. I studied that in Bangalore, and then I did a master's as well, which I did from China, and that was a master's in transcultural design.
Yeah, this is what interested me. Like when I read your bio, I'm like, what's transcultural? Like, like you don't really understand. Like, first of all, sculpting itself is like nobody does it. Like, like last sculptor I remember is Michelangelo. So
me too.
and that girl from Hello who was making Lionel Richie's face. So who's next? So now I know a sculptor who's sitting in front of me. So tell me what happened there.
So I realized in the first year that I did fine arts that I was very bored of drawing. Because I thought like if I do anything too long, if I do anything too long in an instituted way, then they'll ruin it for me. And I was like, okay, that's enough. Thank you. 1 year, I got my foundation. I got it. I got the foundation year sorted. So I was like, let me do something different, which I don't know, so that I can actually learn. So I did sculpture, but I was the only one in my year who chose it. And so I used to walk in the morning at 9 a.m. and I used to meet the seniors of my college. And I guess now I can't mention the college's name. But because of what I'm going to say. Because everyone used to be so stoned in my college.
That's every college.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I used to walk in and I used to
If you were in fine arts college, then people were more than getting stoned.
Yeah, more, probably. Yeah. So I used to walk in and I used to be like, hello, good morning to my seniors. And they would stare at my right eyebrow pretty much. And so that was life. I wanted to kill myself every morning. And I was so full of all my kickboxing energy and I was nowhere to go.
So kids, don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs, kids. And definitely don't inhale lead pencils.
That's number one, because lead pencils are so common.
Yeah, I can tell you where to get them. Those lethal things. Go for 10B. That's nice.
10 times the
10 times the power.
Yeah. So moving on from there.
Yeah. And then transcultural design is basically... You want to know what that is?
Yeah, what that means.
Okay. Because I can... it's looking at design from an anthropological and ethnographic perspective. So basically, the reason I went to China to study it, to see how the same thing that you design could be, culturally have more meanings. So it's a French university called École de Design Nord-Atlantique, and basically they want to infiltrate the third world. So they're sending
infiltrate the third world.
So they're sending kids to major cities in China and India to do their masters in transcultural design. Because because that's where the new markets are.
Okay.
So that's where you basically can discern, this is the market. So how do you design for them in a relevant way? You can't use Western aesthetic all the time.
That's true.
You have to do...
influence the cultures over there in your art. Yeah.
So I was the only Indian person who applied in a French university, which was in China. And that's what ended up happening. I was the only brown person I knew for miles. And it was weird because I was seeing the contradictions. Like, they were saying, oh my God, this place is so crowded. And I was going like, oh my God, this place is so clean. Opposite. Completely.
Have you been to India?
Yeah, they have not been to India. And so for me, it was like a very eye-opening experience in many ways. And I ended up designing a language learning game
nice.
while I was working there. So basically, I was taking sounds that have meanings in all languages that I had access to at the time. I speak French, so English, French, Hindi, and Chinese. So all of them would have one sound, and it would mean completely different things in the 4 languages. So I made a game based on that.
Nice. What happened after that? Did you come back to India?
Yeah, I came back to India, and then I got a job here. And I realized that this is it. Like, I'm not gonna, so I'm not gonna stay with my parents, and I'm not gonna be that little rich girl. So I moved out, and I decided to completely, I started being completely independent. So that's why I have a job. It's like,
At this point, I'm interested to how rich are your parents?
I don't know.
Yeah, you've not lived with them for a while now.
I don't remember anymore.
Okay, so I also wanted to ask before we go into the break is at what age did you identify yourself as queer? Because that's not a term we usually, for example, let's go back all the way to the dark ages of people throwing slurs at gay people and lobotomizing them.
Yeah.
And queer was one of those bad terms which was used to tie the gay community together, like how we use say someone is called a gudwa or baila in India. So from that, the etymology of the word has changed over time.
Yeah.
So how do you now say ki queer is an identity that I like to live with?
That's true. I think actually I started with something more specific, which was pansexual.
Okay.
So I identified myself as a pansexual in 2010. I mean, until then I thought I was maybe bi. So queer became the thing that people understood more easily. I didn't want to explain every time what is pansexual. So, and I just like I guess I'm lucky enough that I grew up in a time when that slur connotations were no longer so strong around me. So I found something very liberating in the ambiguity of it.
So now we actually embrace the word queer and take it in our stride, saying we are different. So in general, queer is something that defines your uniqueness, something that sets you apart in general. And that's a blanket statement maybe, but then that's like most of us. But we have to identify our queerness, right? We have to really live up to it and own it. So you are owning it, and we'll find out soon in the next part of this episode. So we'll take a break now.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Millie, are you with us? Are you happy to be here?
I'm so happy to be here. I'm gay and happy.
Yes, so am I. Let's come back soon. Yep.
Cool.
Did you know that some termites in Africa have a pleasantly minty flavor?
Did you know that India's largest music festival was in a way conceptualized in Estonia?
Did you know that the awesomest chips in the world are found only inside US prisons?
Hello, I'm Chuck.
I'm Shrikit.
And I'm Naren.
And together we are
Simplified,
a podcast that helps you appear smarter to an audience that knows no different.
Or give you some stuff to talk about at parties.
We are ultra-crepidarians.
And if you don't know what that means,
Then tune into Simplified with a B on iTunes, Audioboom, or your favorite podcasting app. Episodes out every fortnight.
Hello and welcome back to Keeping It Queer. And before we left, we were both screaming we're gay and happy. And here we are. So I wanted you to tell the audiences how you identified your quirks and then used it in your art form.
Okay. Lots of different things happened. I realized that I can't make it as an artist alone. I had to get a professional degree and do something more useful to the market or the industry, and I went ahead and did that. I convinced my father that China was the way to go because it was the future, and him being a businessman and a risk taker bought it. So they sent me. And after that, I wanted to do art. I always wanted to do art, but I just never understood. I think as an artist, it's complicated in India. Unless you draw boobs and triangles, it's like
I like her boobs and triangles.
Boobs and triangles are basically what is art. You know, like, I mean, I'm no disrespect. Like, guys, I love art and everything. But I, for the longest time, couldn't understand what was so great about some art and what wasn't great about the other art. Like, what made something better than the other. Kala Ghoda Festival for years, I think, used to have rickshaws and crows and boobs and triangles.
Yeah, Kala Ghoda has lost it. Like, again, if anybody disagrees, go fuck yourself. I don't give a shit. But Kala Ghoda has now degraded itself to this level of, like, now it's like a best from waste kind of exhibition. It's not even art anymore.
Yeah, but yeah, it is at least.
Because see, I don't know how you define art, but for me, it's something that exudes a certain feeling that I connect with immediately, and I get what it's trying to say. That's basically what art is.
Yeah.
People are now making obnoxious, like, contortions of shit to just make a point, but that's not what you're doing.
Yeah, I used to worry a lot about that. So that's also one of the reasons why I never did art. And I realized how much networking it took, and I didn't have it in me. So I just decided to, like, keep my nose down, continue with, like, something that was a service that I knew that I was providing, which was more like transactional.
Correct.
So I had this job, and now I finished 3 years yesterday, which is crazy.
Nice.
Crazy, completely crazy. So I've never been this consistent in my life. So,
but yeah, like, it's a good thing that art now in the modern society finds its place in a proper way, Like, for example, if you say graphic artists, then back in the day, like, it was not so easy to get jobs as a graphic artist because there are not many outlets for that. Now you have an entire digital agency just running on graphic arts, and that, and you have to look your best when you're going on social media, right?
Yeah.
And that matters.
Yeah, totally. So, so then actually what happened with the paintings is that I used to paint anywhere. If I travel, I would draw my colleagues' faces and they would pin it up to their desk. I would doodle, I would make memes about my boss. And that actually got me hired. Fun story.
Tell us a story, go ahead.
Oh, the story. So I was a mere intern at my office, and
mere intern,
a mere measly intern, all of 23. And then my boss was British, and he had this habit of saying "aha." So we found a really funny picture of him making an expression like, a bit like an ostrich, like taken from a lower angle. So I'll do it for you now, and it's best for people to guess what this looks like. So I just made a bunch of memes of, mundane things in office. Like,
so with his ostrich face.
Yeah, with his ostrich face. It said, "Oh, we spent 500 rupees on chai today." Nobody ate my lunch even though I passed it around the office. Or
ostriches can't fly.
Something like that, yeah. And it just went on. Like, after that, I made more memes about more people in my office. They loved me so much. They were just like, "We need you as a part of the office culture." And I was like, yes, there is need for memes.
Memes, yeah. I have the need.
Yeah.
The need for
the memes.
Yeah.
The memes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is a millennial thing to, like, right now throw at people's faces. To anybody above 30 listening to this, I'm sorry.
Get with it. To anyone above 30, get fucking with it.
It's Y2K16.
Oh, yeah. 17. Hello.
17, oh, sorry.
Okay, we are getting old now.
Oh,
I heard there's a next generation of Gen Z. So
I
work in marketing,
because
and I'm
everybody
like,
who was officially a millennial is now above 18. They can't claim about it.
They're as tall as us or taller. What the hell?
Yeah.
I can't even tell them apart because of size. How am I supposed to... Like, can they put glitter on themselves or something to distinguish something stupid? Some new trend can come.
They're not unicorns. They have to glitter themselves and walk.
No, I'm the unicorn. They don't get the glitter. They have to have something else.
Yeah.
I don't know what. Maybe they have great makeup skills. I think that's what they have.
That's what they have.
Gen Z.
Gen Z have better makeup.
They do.
But for what it's worth, we're going to leave a shitty earth to you. So best of luck taking care of post-Trump.
No. Anyone listening, listen. That's not the whole point of this show.
I'm cynical.
If I may take your place, Naveen, for a second.
For a second.
Clearing things up. If you young people are still looking for hope and how things get better, we are trying to leave a better earth.
No, we've kept the same message through our show for most parts. But some days, man, we just go cynical. But yeah, so let's move on from...
You're moving back. So my boss, like my other boss, whom I kind of, was a big fan of, I worshipped her. She was, one day she found this picture of Shakti Kapoor wearing nothing but a blue sarong that was going viral,
I remember this,
relentlessly on the internet.
This was around the time when Shraddha Kapoor was making a debut also.
Correct.
So again, more memes came from that. about Shakti Kapoor being a spawn.
Yeah. So, and exactly that's probably what got him laid, no? Like that whole
the leopard
blue.
print.
Yeah, like not the Shakti Kapoor masculinity or the rapist and all. No, it's when he looks vulnerable and he's looking like leering, like, you know, he's like, please look at me in this blue sarong. And actually, so my boss just said to me, and she said like, all I want is an oil painting of this picture above my bed. Okay, and first
What?
yeah, and this was actually at the my housewarming party when I just moved out into this like dingy little Bombay-sized apartment, which is, you know, like
A matchbox.
yeah, basically. And I was like, guys, come huddle up, you know, sit on the floor. There's no
Yes.
space. Like, come.
There's some matchstick there. You might want to keep yourself warm.
Yeah, keep yourself warm and like, you know, like I don't have any glasses. I've run out of spoons. You know, like plastic spoons.
Use your palms.
Yeah, use your palms. And this was all of 7 people probably, but still, my boss was there, and she was like, "I want an oil painting of this above my bed," and I'm going like, I'm trying to ignore her in this tiny little house of mine.
Yeah.
So she tries to catch my attention, it doesn't work. Couple of days later, I'm telling someone after I've settled into my house, I'm going like, I wish I had a mini bar, you know, because I was obviously a millennial, and I was like, yeah, work-life balance. I need to have a bar. The other time I want a party, whatever, you know, like so she overhears that and she comes over and she says, I will give you a mini bar if you give me that painting. And I'm going like, you have a deal, ma'am. You have sealed the deal.
And from there you got a new nickname also, uske baad.
The bar got a name.
Yeah.
The bar is called the Millie Bar.
Yeah.
When she gave it to me, and I made her that painting, which was the first of the many paintings I was then going to make.
Yeah.
The effect was quite, you know,
Mesmerizing.
commendable on my colleagues, because they would all go like, wow, like there was this
like,
you know,
what is this? And this is
eternal
amazing.
quality about this response.
Yeah, so I saw your paintings at an exhibition at the Hive, which is no more.
Right.
2 seconds of
R.I.P.
silence.
Hive.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Yes.
Hive, yeah. And Hive is where I really like started doing comedy and did
I saw
Rainbow
you there.
Mic over there as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I saw the exhibition, and so what most people were doing there was just they were transfixed. Everybody would stare at it for a second, and they're like, "What is this? Why is this? But I want some more of this." That's precisely how the feeling the art
That's
was.
so sweet of you.
Yeah.
To all my art teachers listening,
I think
I'm
I've
doing okay.
I've summed up Millie's career in 3 words. But yeah, so like it's unique, and we'll put up some photos along with the promotional post of this on ivmpodcast.com, and I wanted to share this story because art creates something more meaningful, you know. That sometimes words can't do. There's a barrier that art breaks, and what I see through your paintings is like, for example, in Aditya Pancholi peeping out of a curtain. It's like you turned a masculinity aspect around, right? You put a rainbow tint on that whole thing, which is the tagline for your art in general, that you look at world through rainbow tinted glasses, and what you get out of it is a juxtaposition of something madness. And I'm using these big words because I want to sound like an art connoisseur, but I don't give a shit at this point. I'm like, that needs to be framed, and that needs to be in every house. So how did you get that stride going? Like, did you think about it so much in detail like I am?
So around the time when I just finished making Shakti Kapoor, the first one, the Blue Sarong.
Yeah.
That was the biggest one actually. It was this big canvas, and I was like, suddenly I'm thinking, if Shakti Kapoor had the guts to be himself, literally, why does the world not have it? And then I was like, yeah, why don't people like just say they're feminists, and why don't people just say they hate their husbands? And then I realized, why don't people come out of the closet? Like, I mean, that's all smaller than Shakti Kapoor like doing that. And literally when I finished painting that, I was like, after this I can paint anything. Like,
Correct.
literally, I was telling my friends, my autobiography is going to be so easy to paint after this, because
It all began with Shakti Kapoor.
yeah, like everything I've seen in my life does not compare. You know, like I've seen some horrible stuff, but Shakti Kapoor painting detail, you know, all the chest hair and all of that, like
The
full
loins.
on. The loins, and you know, I signed on his like thigh, which was like a last minute, like afterthought. Like I was thinking, like, where do I sign?
Yeah.
And the only place there was like this exposed deepest part of this like pinkish thigh.
Yeah.
And
between the slit, right?
yeah, like where there's this muscle that, you know, like you can see the niche wala. And I remember when my boss saw that and she was like, you were a genius, you know, like, you know, you are such a genius. Like everyone was like, okay, like that really puts the cherry on it. Like, and I'm
the cherry on Shakti.
On Shakti, yeah.
So then that's one form of activism that you do through your art. And so tell us more about how you, back in Bangalore, where you really started going into activism with the LGBT community. How was it back then?
Okay, so actually, I think around first year of college, I realized that obviously I'm not fully straight. Like, that's not going to happen. But I mean, that's why I started.
Is anybody really fully straight? I think never. Yeah.
Never. And then
most people don't like. Why don't they come out of the closet? That's
because it seems. I mean, I was almost feeling stupid for not having like articulated it before. Obviously, I used to have crushes on girls. Like even when I was a small child, like I went to an all-girls school, and there were, you know, just the way I used to say I have a twin sister Maya. There was this girl I had a crush on. I used to make up stories about her all the time. I used to tell people, you know, she lands from a land far away on a plane every morning to school, and she's made of tinsel and candy, and I don't know what. Like, I was so like amazed by her, and I think back and
again, how rich were you? Tinsel and candy, no kid. Like, I don't remember ever knowing these terms when I was a kid.
I don't think I used them either.
Okay.
No, I'm just.
The imagination is stronger than it was now.
I don't know what I said about her, but I remember thinking that she obviously like had like a special diet of something wonderful. Maybe at the time I thought Pond's talcum powder, you know, like kids eat that sometimes.
It smells so nice, must be edible also, like so delicious.
Yeah, kids eat that.
Smells like Mogra.
So I actually can't tell you what that I remember. But I remember making up stuff about her. I remember definitely thinking that she lands on a plane every morning to school. Like she comes from a country far away, like England or some like.
Just for school.
Just for school, because otherwise why would she deign to come here? Like only because of school, like only because maybe she liked the school.
Uske पैर जब धरती पर पड़ते हैं,
something like that, you know.
तो बाहर आ जाती है.
So in 2010 when I went to Bangalore, I went to my first Pride Parade and I helped organize it. I was mobilizing some of my juniors there because I transferred into third year, so I was a senior when I joined. So I got started. Everyone started calling me the big scary lesbian or you know something like that, and I was like, really, lesbian? That sounds kind of cool. Am I? And I really wasn't sure, and I didn't have anything to back it up, but I did. I mean, I don't know, like, for someone who lives so much in their own imagination, it's, I don't know.
Difficult to counsel someone else.
It's difficult to even say what I really am. Like, I'm also always doubting myself. I'm also like, oh, but you know, where's the line? What's black? What's white? So, I mean, what can I say? But like, I became very clear to me that I can't really put myself in a box. That's when I got the courage. Like, it wasn't who I was with or who I could fall in love with. It was more this, I know that for me, like, love is bigger, romance is bigger, feeling connected to someone is bigger. And to be honest, that's all I was peddling. And that's, you know, that makes me connect so much with the whole movement. And of course, and you know, a lot of people like to ask, but who have you dated and what have they had in their pants?
What is the gossip?
How did you do it with someone who had that in their pants? And what to say, but like I can tell you that I fell in love with all kinds of, you know, like and I can't say it was any less love, you know, because you look beyond gender. The whole binaries of it doesn't matter. Like you fall in love with things, with the beauty of them, with the charm of it. Yeah, and then sometimes you think that the timing is just right. Like you think that the music is just right and the sunlight is just right, and then you meet and your eyes meet and you're like, oh my god, this is the perfect moment.
It's almost like deja vu at that point, right? When everything hits the right spot.
Everything aligns. It's like a solar eclipse. It's like,
oh, to be alive, right? So it's so difficult to explain to a lot of people how you feel about most people or most anything, you know, like for pansexuals it's very difficult to like put it in words, but you're doing that through art, as I guess, like that helps segregate it one way. But is there more outlets that you want to express it through? Definitely, and I think this art is just touching the tip of the iceberg, which is because masculinity is so monolithic that it's just too easy and too fun to
make fun of it right now and say like, bro, there's more to you than that. And I think that's all my art is doing. If I really have to go into like love and truly feeling things, and there's a lot of serious things to explore, and I also find that maybe I have the guts, maybe I don't, maybe I need to rein in a little bit more to begin to tell that story. So there's always more.
So let's figure out what Millie's going to do with her life aage, and let's take a small break.
Hey friend, so if you're listening to a podcast right now, you're probably some kind of a nerd at heart at least. So maybe, just maybe, you might like another podcast about nerds, by nerds, and for nerds.
It's called Geek Fruit, a community to unite estranged geeks from across India and later on the world. We talk about television, movies, science fiction, adventure, fantasy, etc. Anything nerdy, it's all here on Geek Fruit. You can catch a fresh episode every Monday and a retcon episode every Tuesday.
And you can check us out on iTunes, Audioboom, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. Like my favorite podcast app, the IVM podcast app. Give me my money, IVM.
Good plug.
Happy listening, you nerds.
And we're back on Keeping It Queer. I have Millie here with me. And right before we went for the break, we were talking about how it's been a weird transition from different backgrounds, and a mishmash of a lot has brought your life together in a beautiful way. And you're using now the medium of art to shatter gender binaries and masculinity in general. So where do you see yourself going from this point on?
I just think that even today, like, I mean, you know, I feel like I've been around the community for long enough. I've been to the Shanghai LGBT parties, and I've been here in Mumbai and Bangalore, and I've, you know, met a lot of people, and I still feel like I haven't discovered quite enough. I haven't really discovered like what, you know, what makes a relationship really fulfilling, or like I haven't questioned enough of the norms that we live with. Like there's just so much to do, like once you begin, and I just feel sorry for people who don't even start, you know, who start looking, and who just follow the path that has come and
stunted most people for most parts, you know. Like even when I look at the gay community, and there's a sense of, for most people, the sense of fulfillment in finding a partner. And yet I was reading this article recently on Huffington Post, which very elaborately and very sensibly puts out the fact that though we have managed to fight the AIDS epidemic, though we have made progress with gay rights in terms of licenses in America and other parts of the world, there's still loneliness beyond compare, depression and suicides beyond compare.
I was reading the same thing, and there's so much anxiety. There's something called minority stress.
Precisely.
We were looking at the same article.
So we will link it to the episode again, and so shouldn't be laughing at this.
No, I shouldn't be laughing. I was just laughing at the coincidence that we both read it. Like, because I was thinking about like how our social media lives are also so similar nowadays.
it overlaps. So as I was reading this, and there was a real, like, I was alert for most parts, and I was like, this is a true problem. Like, haven't we now figured out? Like, we and this is taking the devil's advocate's role. I'm saying if we have said that two gay people, two men can fall in love and live a happy life, and if it's not transitioning to paper, if what the statistics are saying, where do we fix this?
So the problem is not just that it's possible on paper. It's also it has to be possible mentally. I have so many gay friends who have often admitted to me that they still feel like, at least one of them said that, I still feel like I have something wrong with me. Like, I feel like someday I'll discover why I'm a deviant. And I was like, why would you think of yourself that way? But that's true, you know. There's this whole breeders sort of propaganda that we all sort of internalize as kids, that to have sex means to procreate, and it is, as opposed to expressing yourself or seeing the beauty in another, or, you know, which too is life affirming. Maybe it does not lead to a baby, but it does put more of the life force in you, and so like that idea is not very commonplace.
The appreciation of things in general.
The idea that that to have a queer relationship is completely normal, it is so rebellious that it stresses everyone out. Like it stresses you out as you're doing it. You know you're like standing out. You're sticking out like a sore thumb. Like, you know that you are not normal. You're constantly aware and weighed down by this fact.
Yeah.
So it's not easy.
It takes a toll on people, and
yeah, and
it's
it
like,
takes a toll on people everywhere in the world. Quite similar to just like they say, like sexism isn't a problem of the third world, right? It's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's like no one is free. It's like a global thing. The world has not normalized it for you. So,
and now it's maybe, are you saying it's too late to now like go back, because now we have to like fight centuries of patriarchy and capitalism and sexism.
I don't think it's too late. I just think that there's so much
but it's so like not a major part of the population will be doing something like just loving things is what I'm saying. Just enjoying things and living as a nice nucleus of people just having fun, and nowhere is sex a problem or religion a problem or politics a problem. And that kind of utopian society we can't even envision at this point is what I'm saying. So
that's why when you see it, you see someone daring to do it, it's something rare and wonderful. And just like you would not, I mean, you would not like kill a unicorn. I mean, you would let it.
Unless you're Voldemort.
Are you Voldemort? I mean, no, right? I don't think so. You like being mortal and enjoying this whole like this life that is like good because it's limited, and why would you just randomly kill a unicorn? So
I'm like, be like Ron Weasley. He's marveling at everything almost every day.
He's just gawking, like
he's amazed at things, and that's how we should be. And be amazed at things, be artistic is what we find out at the end of this episode.
Hey, I thought of a great new swear word on the way here. Putin. And did you see that toy? Something to put in your butt?
No.
It's a little mini Vladimir Putin. It's a butt plug. Can you please?
I'll have to look for this.
Yeah, exactly. Find it, please.
I would use it. No.
Yeah, no, not use it. Just keep it. Like, someday if you're mad at your boyfriend, be like, do you want me to put in in your butt? No? Then let us make up. No, I don't know. So
that was like a random burst of information I needed in my life. I'm so glad. So like at the end of this episode, we're not really sure what to expect with the world at this point.
Yeah, but you know what? You can have fun, and you can find little places of happiness, little pods of happiness. You do have the power to create, and if nothing else, there is the internet, guys.
Yes.
Use the internet
wisely.
Put your voice out there wisely. Whatever, like explore, But there is kindness if you look for it. So if you just find like one or two friends, which is how I ended up doing this painting series. Like I had one or two friends who said, "Yeah," and I was like, you know what? Just because you said that, I'm going to make 10 more paintings. And they were probably like, okay, what the fuck?
Thoda
zyada ho gaya. And can you imagine my dad when he came to the exhibition after his walk, wearing his shorts and his socks and his and then he had his water bottle. My parents both, they came with after their walk from Carter Road, they came to Hive, and they were like, they saw the paintings and they were like 11 half naked men. So this is what my daughter is doing.
So proud.
So proud. No, actually, they were really confused. But I was like, you know what? Like, we are not doing justice to these men and etc. And whatever. I just did it because like something. And it was
so go out, be crazy, and take risks. Where can they find your artwork, Millie?
They can find it on Facebook. I have a page called Let Me Paint That For You. It's spelled correctly. No.
And do your subjects have to be half naked for the portraits?
Not at all. Actually, I do this. I do this. I do something called queer traits, which are actually portraits of people in psychedelic colors. The idea is that you are being seen through rainbow tinted glasses.
Oh, nice.
So I do them digitally. I do them with paint. Basically, just so that I love making portraits actually in general.
I want one of mine. This is sounding really interesting.
Yeah, I will. I'll show you some also.
Cool.
And those are also relatively cheaper, guys. And otherwise, you can find yourself a print of any of these Bollywood actors. And I'll be finding ways to make other stuff soon so that I have more fun and I don't get bored at my job and stuff. So,
As we all do.
Yeah.
So this has been an episode of Keeping It Queer. Millie, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
I hope you had a fun conversation.
I did.
Yes, and this is me, Naveen Naruna, signing off.
Thanks so much for having me.
Goodbye. Thank you so much. Well, if you enjoyed the show, you can listen to more of it on any of the podcasting apps you like. You can look out for us on Audioboom, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Beyond Pod. But if you're looking for us on the iTunes India store, you might have a bit of a trouble finding us because of the language used on the show. So be sure to change your location and then listen to us. For now, it's me, Naveen Naruna, signing off. Goodbye. Thank you so much. And please continue keeping it queer. Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcast, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.